In 1843, 6 small brass plates covered with strange symbols were dug from an ancient burial mound in Illinois. They appear to be an extraordinary archaeological discovery, and they were soon delivered to Joseph Smith for examination. According to one contemporary account, Joseph translated part of them, but there was a problem. The Kinderhook plates were fake. They had been manufactured, engraved, and deliberately buried by men who apparently wanted to expose Joseph Smith as a fraud. So, did their plan succeed? Did these men fool Joseph Smith? The answer is more complicated than either critics or defenders sometimes admit. The story began near Kinderhook, Illinois, about 75 miles south of Nauvoo. In April 1843, a local man named Robert Wiley claimed that he had dreamed about buried treasure. A group of residents then excavated an indigenous burial mound. During the excavation, they reportedly uncovered human remains and 6 bell-shaped brass plates. Each plate was engraved on both sides with symbols that looked like an ancient language. The plates were fastened together by a metal ring. Because Joseph Smith claimed the ability to translate ancient records, the plates were brought to Nauvoo. Newspapers quickly became interested. The Quincy Whig suggested that if Joseph could decipher the symbols, he might reveal important information about the early history of the American continent. On May 1, 1843, Joseph Smith's secretary, William Clayton, recorded a remarkable statement in his journal. Clayton wrote that Joseph had translated a portion of the plates and said that they contained the history of the man with whom they had been buried. According to Clayton, Joseph identified this man as a descendant of Ham through Pharaoh, king of Egypt. That statement is the strongest evidence that Joseph attempted to interpret the Kinderhook plates. But there are important qualifications. These were William Clayton's words, not a translation written or dictated by Joseph Smith. No manuscript containing a Kinderhook translation has ever been discovered. Joseph never published a translation, produced a new book of scripture from the plates, or announced that God had revealed their meaning to him. Another contemporary report said that Joseph requested a Hebrew Bible and a lexicon while examining the plates. Other evidence suggests that someone compared one of the symbols with material in an Egyptian grammar created by Joseph Smith and his associates several years earlier. This indicates that Joseph may have been attempting an ordinary comparison of symbols rather than receiving a revelation. However, that still leaves a difficult fact. Joseph apparently considered the plates potentially authentic, and Clayton believed he had interpreted at least one of their characters. Interest in the plates soon disappeared. Joseph did not continue the project after the first week of May 1843. There is no known evidence that he ever completed or even seriously began a full translation. Then, decades later, the truth emerged. In 1879, Wilbur Fugate, one of the men connected with the discovery, confessed that the plates were a hoax. Fugate explained that the plates had been cut from brass, engraved with meaningless symbols, treated with acid to make them appear old, and buried in the mound. Not everyone immediately accepted his confession. For many years, some Latter-day Saint writers continued to argue that the plates might be genuine. But in 1980, scientific testing was performed on one surviving plate. The evidence showed that it had been etched using a 19th century chemical process. The Kinderhook plates were conclusively exposed as modern forgeries. So, did they fool Joseph Smith? If the question is whether Joseph initially accepted the plates as possible ancient artifacts, the evidence suggests that he did. Nothing in the surviving record shows that he immediately recognized them as a fraud. If William Clayton's journal is accurate, Joseph also offered at least a preliminary interpretation of one portion. In that limited sense, the hoax appears to have fooled him. But if the question is whether Joseph produced a revelation-based translation of the plates, the evidence does not establish that. There is no completed translation, no revelation, no published scripture, and no record of Joseph declaring the entire document authentic. This creates a problem for two extreme versions of the story. The claim that Joseph instantly exposed the plates as fraudulent is not supported by the historical record. But the claim that he produced an extensive inspired translation of the plates is also unsupported. The most reasonable conclusion is that Joseph examined the Kinderhook plates, believed they might be genuine, and made a tentative attempt to understand at least one symbol. He was interested, but apparently not interested enough to pursue a complete translation. For believers, The episode may demonstrate that Joseph Smith did not treat every historical or linguistic judgment he made as a revelation from God. For critics, it raises a serious question. If Joseph possessed a supernatural gift of translation, why did he fail to recognize a deliberate 19th century forgery? The Kinderhook plates do not provide an easy answer to the larger question of Joseph Smith's prophetic claims, but they do offer a warning about history. The evidence rarely fits perfectly into the simple stories told by either side. The plates were fake. Joseph appears to have been temporarily taken in by them, but the dramatic translation sometimes attributed to him was never produced. What do you think? Was Joseph simply examining a curious artifact using the limited resources available to him? Or does his reported interpretation show that the hoax successfully exposed him? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and please keep the discussion respectful. If you enjoyed this honest look at one of the most controversial moments in Latter-day Saint history, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to Path to Growth. We explore the difficult questions, overlooked evidence, and fascinating stories that help us better understand Mormon history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.